Keep life simple. Don't let the distractions influence your actions.
You are Locked On Fantasy Basketball, your daily podcast on fantasy basketball. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball podcast brought to you by Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd and I am the lead fantasy analyst at basketballmonster.com, and you can find me on Twitter as always at redrock_bball. Today what we're going to be doing is looking back at some of the Summer League performances, just wrapping up Summer League with a bow this week by going over the performances across all 30 teams and what it could potentially mean for this year and future seasons, while also recapping the news with a couple of signings going down today as well. We'll talk about those. Also, make sure you are checking out my Twitter timeline for information of getting into the Red Rock Challenge redraft leagues. And also been thinking about it. A lot of people have been asking me. I have filled up 6 new Dynasty leagues for this season. A lot of people still asking me, are you going to be doing any Dynasty leagues? I want a spot in a Dynasty league. And originally I wasn't going to, but I think I am going to do one more Dynasty league. Now, in order to get priority into this Dynasty League, the details for entering it will be posted on my Patreon at patreon.com/redrock_bball. The current plan for this league is sort of a hybrid keeper/Dynasty League. It's going to be 12 teams head-to-head. But in terms of the keeping ability, you're going to have the ability to keep every player. The thing is that you have to have that draft pick for every guy. So whatever round you pick that player in, you have to forego that draft pick. If you make a trade during the season and you get another second round, a player who was picked in the second round, and then you've also got a second round guy, you have to work out a way or which one of those guys you're going to keep, unless you can acquire 2 second round draft picks for the next coming season. So some decisions will have to be made in the league in that regard. You also have to work out, well, yeah, do I let go of a guy in the third round and get myself a pick there for an incoming rookie for the next season, or do I let a 9th round pick go? What are other people going to be doing? So there's going to be a lot of balls in the air in terms of the dynamics of this league.
Giggity!
But it's basically it's going to be you'll have the option to keep every player on your team. You just have to have a corresponding draft pick in future years or in the coming season to be able to deal with that player. So there will be some decisions that need to be made. Do you pick a guy in the 4th round and then he becomes not as good? He becomes an 8th round value play. Do you spend that 4th round pick? Do you let that guy go back and try and get him later on? So there are quite a few different considerations. So the details for it will be posted up on Patreon for this Dynasty League, which is something I've just started. I'm still working on the rules at the moment for it, so once that's all sorted, then it will be posted on Patreon. But the only way to get the access, they're 12-team league, and I will be in this league as well. It is the only startup Dynasty I'm doing this season, so I'll be in that league also. So make sure you are checking out the Patreon page and getting involved if that sounds like a league that you would be into. At Michael Bolton, we've got stuff to talk about.
Let's get to it.
Kevin Love has signed an extension with the Cleveland Cavaliers, 4 years, $120 million. You would have heard me in yesterday's show talking about dynasty ranks and how I'm a little bit more down on Colin Sexton than other people for this particular reason. Everyone thought, immediately the Cavs are trading Kevin Love based on this LeBron James move over the offseason. And I didn't think that was the case. It's not the case. Now, this contract extension that Love gets means that he can be traded, but he can't be traded for a few months. But he can be traded before the trade deadline. So pay attention to that part of it. But he won't be traded at the beginning of the season. He won't be traded before the season begins. He's going to be on the Cavs for the majority of this season. The next question you have to look at is, who is going to look at Kevin Love and think we want to be spending $30 million a year on him in 5 years' time? Is anybody going to think that? Probably not. But we also saw Blake Griffin's contract get moved this past season. You could also look at it from the flip side of things and look at Kevin Love and say, well, now that we know that he's locked in for the next 5 seasons, we'd be more inclined to trade for him because he's not going to bolt. If Phoenix wants him, we can trade for him. We can send Josh Jackson back. We can send TJ, whatever we're sending back. We can get Kevin Love, and we've got him for 5 years. Yeah, we have to pay a shitload of money, and by the time he gets to the age of 34, which is what I believe he'll be when that contract is over, he might even be 35. He's going to be nowhere near $30 million, and that's a decision that you have to make. But you could view this from two different prisms of value. I've got Kevin Love locked in, so I know I'm going to get 3 high-quality seasons out of him. Or the other way, like, why would I want to be paying him $30 million at the age of 35? So there's 2 different ways there, but because the extension has signed, he can't be traded straight away. It has to be around that trade deadline time. And the fact the extension signed now means that he can be traded at that point in the season, but it won't be happening initially, which is something to pay attention to. And again, it's one of the reasons why I'm not as big on Colin Sexton as other people are. I don't think the Cavs are just going to be rolling out, hey, Sexton, do everything that you want. You just get your carte blanche to do whatever you want. I don't think that's going to be the case. This sort of indicates that. Love, will he ever go back to being that monster he was in Minnesota where he was a top 10 player consistently? I don't think so, but he also hasn't cracked the top 30 at any point in Cleveland, and I am 100% confident that he will do that this season. His last year in Minnesota, he had a usage of 29%. He hasn't gotten over, 26.1 was the highest he had in Cleveland. I think he can push that up to 28 or 29. I think that we'll see the assist numbers, which was such a huge part of Kevin Love's value in Minnesota, jump up as well. He went from 4.4 down to 2.2 in between Minnesota and Cleveland, expecting him to get to 3.5 again with a little bit more ball handling, a little bit more of that outlet transition stuff that Love does so well without LeBron around and without any really excellent passes on this team. Sexton and Hill and Clarkson, these aren't great passes. Love could be initiating more. That gives him an extra bump. I would expect a 20 and 10 type of season for Kevin Love as opposed to the 17 and 9 he had last year, plus getting 3.5 assists per game, which should vault him close to top 20. Now, injuries have been a concern from Love. He played 60 games in 16-17, 59 games last season, only 28 minutes per game last year. I expect that to rise as well, and he is a guaranteed top 30 guy and is probably going to be a second-round draft pick for this season, but you do have to factor that injury portion in. I would also expect his free throw attempts to go up. He was taking 8 free throw attempts per game in Minnesota, didn't crack 5 per game in Cleveland. Again, I don't think he's getting to Minnesota levels. I don't think he's getting 8 attempts per game, but 5.5 to 6 might be a realistic expectation as he becomes the 100% the focal point of this offense in Cleveland. So I think a pretty decent comeback from Kevin Love is on the cards for this coming season, but it does not rule out a trade for Love at some point this season, and depending on which team you are and how you view value and assets, it might make him impossible to trade for, or it might make him more appealing to trade for. So there are different ways there. So in the end, his likelihood of getting traded, well, for the start of the season, it's not happening, but later in the year, it's pretty similar to what it was, because you're going to have those 2 different things. Well, you've ruled us out, but now you've brought us back in. As 2 different teams might say that, well, we're not trading for him. Hey, now we're interested because we've got that long-term commitment. So there's 2 different ways that teams can look at that with Kevin Love. The other signing that went down was Noah Vonleh. He signed with the New York Knicks, a guy that has not been good as the 9th overall pick. He was someone who I was never really high on when he was drafted. I know he was really young and people were like, give him a chance. I remember when he was traded for Nick Batum, people were killing the Hornets. Man, you don't know what you're talking about. The Hornets, they gave up such a promising player to get Batum, who's trash. What a shit trade. Vonleh hasn't been good in Charlotte, in Portland, in Chicago. He's shown flashes. He can be a really strong rebounder. He averaged 13 rebounds per 36 minutes last season. But he hasn't been able to shoot, and that's what he needs to do. He needs to be able to stretch out and hit those threes. 30% last year. 35 the year before, 24 the year before that. Hasn't had an above average true shooting season. As a big man, that's a little bit worrisome as well. Doesn't block shots, doesn't get steals, doesn't pass. There's nothing really exciting here. But of course, we know that Porzingis is out for the Knicks. So power forward depth is important. I think that Mario Hezonja and the Fort Kevin Knox will be holding down the 3 and the 4. There's also Luke Cornett around who can maybe play a little bit of the 4 as well. But Vonleh is going to have an opportunity to play a little bit of backup center, maybe some backup power forward as well. It's not going to be sexy. It's not going to be exciting anywhere. And he probably never cracks the top 200 at any point in his career. But for those in deeper leagues, this is a decent opportunity for him. He's going to have that ability to at least be maybe a semi-regular part of the rotation, which he probably wouldn't on most other teams. He won't be starting, and he's not going to be a big stat contributor player, but he is on a team where he's going to get an opportunity at some point to at least get on the court and back up guys like Hezonja and Knox. Now, obviously, Lance Thomas still around there as well, but not many other great options in that front court unless you want to count Joakim Noah. There is, of course, Mitchell Robinson, who I think is excellent and should be playing over Vonleh, but Noah is there on his 1 year minimum contract. So that is a move that did go on. There's been a few other little moves that have gone on two-way contracts. Travis Weir back with the Lakers on a 2. They just cannot get over Travis Weir, and they should. He had some moments, but yeah, he's back on a 2-way deal as well. But we don't need to talk too much about all of that. Let's get into talking about some Summer League recaps. Going to talk about 10 teams per show here over the next 3 shows. We will start with the Atlanta Hawks. Tyler Dorsey averaged 17.6 points, 7.5 boards, 3 assists, and 1.4 steals. Hit 3 threes, but just took an inordinate amount of shots, just jacking them up basically whenever he wanted, which he's never going to have that opportunity to do during the regular season. I'm not a massive Dorsey fan. I think that there's Kevin Huerter there who they're going to bring in to take some of his minutes. It was okay from Dorsey, but it was very bull hoggish and very shot jacky type of performance. We had the Baptist John Collins, who had 19.7.5. I've spoken a lot about him. I think he's guaranteed. I don't want to say guaranteed. He's pretty bloody close to guaranteed to being a top 50 guy. And if he averaged 16 and 10 this season with 1.5 threes and 1.5 blocks, I don't think that's an unrealistic expectation for the Baptist on high percentages as well. You're starting to hit threes, get the shot blocks coming. He is part of the future core with this team, as is Trae Young, who, despite Kyle McEwen's protestations, I thought was okay. The passing looked pretty good. He's going to get as much opportunity as possible. If you're punting field goal percentage this season, he will be a top 100 guy, almost no doubt, and he's got a chance to be a top 70 guy this season in a punt field goal percentage type setting. He'll get assists, he'll get steals, he'll hit threes, he'll hit his free throws at a high rate, and he will score, and he will be the starter, almost no doubt, over Jeremy Lin there on this team. We also saw the Wizard Amari Spellman, who did enough to impress me, averaged a 1.4 threes, 1.5 steals, and 1.1 blocks. I'm still not totally in on him. I don't ever think that he can become a starter caliber player in the NBA, but enough to think that he's going to get rotation minutes this season. And there's enough there in the fantasy stat set for Amari Spellman. A couple of other guys that are important. Antonius Cleveland, who they did waive and the Chicago Bulls signed. He averaged 8.5 points with 4 rebounds. I'm not a massive Cleveland fan. I don't think there's a huge amount there to see with him. Jalen Adams, I do like. He averaged 9 points, 2.5 assists, and 1.6 steals in only 18 minutes. I think that if Jeremy Lin battles injuries, we'll see Jalen Adams get some backup playing time on this Hawks team as their backup point guard behind Trae Young at times this season. He is on a 2-way guy. I do like him. I thought he showed enough to be a guy that is on an NBA roster, especially an NBA roster like this one in Atlanta with a talent deficit. And Alpha Kaba, who struggled a lot in his first summer league, a guy that projected out really, really well when I looked at his numbers from last draft and then struggled, but came in 1.3 blocks and 1.1 steals in 14 minutes with 6 boards on really good percentages. That's pretty bloody sexy stuff. So he's a name to watch in those deeper leagues. I don't think he'll ever be a starter, but could he come in and be a backup center who plays 18 minutes a night for 2 to 3 seasons and gets 1.5 blocks and 1 steal with 7 rebounds in that 20 minutes? Is similarly to what a Salah Mejri can do in Dallas, high blocks in limited minutes. Maybe Kaba can develop into that, but he definitely showed me more positive signs this season than what he had in Vegas last year when he was there and didn't really show a huge amount. But what we saw from him in this summer league was more indicative or more representative of what his statistical projections showed initially. Let's move on to the Boston Celtics. Not a lot there. Jabari Bird did something, 17 points with 6 rebounds and 3 assists, almost 2 steals. But we know that depth in Boston is pretty significant. He's just not going to get that opportunity if he even remains in Boston as a two-way guy that he was last season. But he showed enough to me, age 24, to say that he can be a guy. Like if he ended up somehow in Atlanta, I'd feel okay about him being that third-string point guard on this team. Showed enough there, but nothing overly exciting. Shemi Ojeleye had 12 and 4 with 1.8 steals. I wasn't overly impressed by Ojeleye as a second-round guy who got playoff minutes. I thought he should have been able to do more, but maybe that's just what he is, a serviceable guy that does his thing, does what he needs to do as his role, but can never elevate it, can never become the man. And I don't think we ever really had expectations of Ojeleye doing that. He's not ever going to be a huge stat stuffer. Neither is Gershon Yabusele, he's just too big, I think. 13 and 6, almost a triple one, but didn't quite get there in 26 minutes. I'm not sure that Yabusele is going to be, or I'm pretty confident he's not going to be a rotation player. Maybe he can in a couple of seasons if they move on from someone like Marcus Morris, but he hasn't really taken the steps forward. The shot's not really there for Gershon either. I'm not totally in on him. Pierre Henry did okay, averaged 4.5 assists in 23 minutes per game. But he's not going to be getting too much happening there in Boston if he even signs a contract, or if he signs a contract with any team. 2.2 steals was pretty interesting from him, while Jared Utoff averaged 8 and 5 with 1.7 blocks. Utoff had some time with Dallas last season. He's someone just to see if he does get picked up, because if he gets playing time, some stats can come from Jared Utoff, which is, I guess, a weird thing to say for a guy of his limited ability, but he's not a horrendous fantasy player, but this is deeper league stuff and not something we really need to get too excited about. He did have a 12 and 9 game last season for the Mavericks against the Suns, but again, that was against the Suns, so not anything to get overly excited about with Jared Utoff. We also had the Rock DJ. Robbie Williams only played the one game, 7 minutes, 4 points and 2 rebounds. So many concerns with him, unfortunately, but the raw talent is clearly still there. Just whether he is able to realize that is, of course, the big concern with Robert Williams. The Brooklyn Nets, this was a weird team. A lot of guys that I liked on this squad. Jarrett Allen, Karis LeVert was there with this team, but they didn't play. Allen played only 2 games and did what he needed to do. 11 and 12 he averaged with 3 blocks. He, along with John Collins, will be 2 guys who really do leap forward to that top 50 spot this coming season, I believe. Brooklyn's got a little bit of depth in that front court with Eddie Davis there now as well, but Jarrett Allen is the future. Of course, at center, Ken Fareed, Jared Dudley, all brought in too, but Allen's going to be getting 28 to 30 a night, which should push him into the top 50. If he averaged 14 and 10 with 2.5 blocks, I wouldn't be surprised. I think he can do okay switching onto the perimeter. His free throw is not too bad. I think he can bang in maybe 0.4 threes per game. That's a possibility for Allen. I do really like his upside. I don't think he ever gets to be a top 20 type of player, but I think he can have multiple top 50 seasons. We also had Yuta Watanabe for the Nets. He ended up signing a 2-way with the Grizzlies. A wing player, but a pretty good shot blocker. Averaged 1.6 blocks in 24 minutes. Almost a steal per game. He's someone to watch and someone I would be looking at in 30-team dynasty leagues. I think he can crack the NBA and become a rotation player at some point. While Theo Pinson also did a little bit there. A steal and a block, 11 points, 4 rebounds, hit 2 threes. A little bit surprising that he was undrafted. Not sure. He's going to turn 23 soon. Not sure there's much upside there in Pinson, but defense is not bad. Scoring, shooting threes, 42% on threes across the 5 games is obviously an encouraging number for him, but really no sort of starter upside for Theo Pinson out of North Carolina. Sean Dawson had one big game for this team that didn't really translate into much in terms of long-time performances. Samaje Kristen is just not good. I think that's the fairest way of mentioning Samaje at this point. And I don't think we're going to be seeing him in the NBA at any point really coming forward for Samaje Kristen. Just back on Theo Pinson, I'm just going to have a look. I'm looking at my his ceiling sort of numbers. I don't really see a huge amount there for him in terms of looking at his overall ceiling type numbers in the NBA. Let's look at the Charlotte Hornets. Some really interesting performances here. We only got the one game out of Malik Monk, and he scored 23 points with 2 steals. There is likely a starting spot open in this Hornets team. Nick Batum slides up to the 3, so the shooting guard position is open. Will it be Malik Monk and Kemba Walker? The defensive backcourt there is going to be atrocious. Or will they put Jeremy Lamb in there? Tone Parker, we know, is the backup one, which is where Malik Monk thrived at the end of last season. But I think we can get 25 minutes a night out of Malik Monk. Lamb can play at the 3, Monk can play at the 1 and the 2. I think you get 25 out of Monk, and he is potentially worth a late round pick, a last pick, if the starting position hasn't been decided upon by James Borrego. Because if Monk gets that, he could average 16 points, 2.5 threes, 3 assists. But if he has to share the court a lot of the time with Kemba and Batum, he becomes the third initiating option, and that drops the assist numbers down. And even on that second unit with Tone Parker, Parker's not really a shooter. He's not a guy that's going to be banging in threes, and he probably needs the ball in his hand a little bit more. So it looked a little bit better for Monk earlier on, but not quite there at this point. Bill Hernan-Gomez had 18 and 12. Hit his threes, blocked shots. Cody Zeller is going to be the starter on this team. I've got full confidence in that, and I really like Zeller. I think you're going to get 29 to 30 minutes out of Zeller, my initial guess, and maybe 20 minutes out of Hernan-Gomez, although playing them together could be a disaster. And there's also Bismack Biyombo around. If Hernan-Gomez could get 24 minutes, he'd be a standard league guy. I just think that they're not going to run a 24-24 Zeller-Hernan-Gomez split this season, making him an unlikely player to be relevant. Now, if he does win the starting spot and plays 28 minutes, it's a no-brainer top 100 situation for Hernan-Gomez, adding threes, blocking shots, great rebounder, solid, efficient scorer as well. But does he get that opportunity? That's the concern. Miles Bridges started off slow but came on strong at the end. 15 and 8, over a steal, over a block, over a 3 per game. That's a 111 right there. Minutes though, Batum, Kid Gilchrist, Lamb, Monk, all these players are ahead of him. Not going to happen too much there. I talked about him in the Dynasty rookie ranks yesterday. There's still a bit of upside there. He does need to work on the defensive and offensive IQ, but looked pretty explosive. While the Baconator, Dwayne Bacon, had 18 points per game, 1.2 steals, and a 3. Is he ahead of Bridges early in the season? Does he move into that Trevion Graham role from last year? I don't really see massive upside from Bacon. Devontae Graham, I thought, looked good. 6 assists in 26 minutes, but dealing with a knee injury, so he is a third-string point guard at this point. And whether he can do any. But Parker's not going to play every game. So Graham could be one of those JJ Barea type stream-in guys who has a short run of 22 minutes per night, although Malik Monk can handle that role a little bit as well. Mangok Mathiang, who was a two-way guy last season, didn't really do a huge amount to impress. Noldus Kuboka back in Europe for this coming season. Great first game, shithouse after that. And JP Macura, I'm not sure how to pronounce that guy's name actually. He's one of their two-way guys for this season. He was okay. There's a little bit there with Macura. I don't know. Someone tell me how to say his name, but not anything that we need to get overly excited about with good old JP. Let's talk Chicago Bulls now. Obviously, the Block Panther Wendell Carter Jr. was fantastic here. 14 and 9, 0.6 threes, 0.8 steals, 2.6 blocks, 55% from the field. I'm not sure if they're going to start him or Robin Lopez, but I think he's getting at least 25 minutes per night from the get-go and will push towards 30 at the end of the season. Yeah, Punch Bob Shiploke is still around there as well, but surely the minutes you want to give at center is going to be to Carter over Portis, and you have Bob backing up Lauri Markkanen, especially if you want to pay any attention to defense at all. I think that Carter is a solid pick. I probably wouldn't pick him inside the top 100 just because of the uncertainty and the way rookies can flounder, especially for the first 2 to 3 months of the season. But outside of that, I'd be happy to take a flyer there. Antonio Blakeney, who has been converted from a two-way to a full contract, 21 points per game on 18 shots. He just takes a shit ton of shots, 3 assists, 1 steal. He will still take those shots, but if he's playing alongside Jabari Parker and Zach LaVine and Lauri Markkanen, you would hope that he doesn't take the ball out of the good players' hands. Not that they're necessarily all that good, but that's the concern with Blakeney. I don't think he's an NBA caliber starter at least. Ryan Archer-Jacquinot, a two-way guy. Assist and steal numbers were good. Plays solid defense, and he's going to get an opportunity at times this season, but the ceiling's pretty low. while Chandler Hutchison had 11, 7, and almost 4. That's why we liked Hutchison as a fantasy type guy, just because of his ability to get assists and play make from the wings. I'm just not certain if the shot's ever going to come around enough for him. 40% from the field in this one. Did hit 50% from threes, but so a little bit fluky there. The shot needs to come around, and of course with Jabari Parker manning the 3 position for Chicago this season, Hutchison's ability to play big minutes is probably limited. They also had Sean Long, who played a little bit for the Nets and the Sixers a couple of years ago, and Kaiser Gates did okay in one of his games, but after that fell away pretty quickly, as is expected. The Cleveland Cavaliers, Chetty Osman looked too good to be out there. Averaged 20 and 8 with 4.5 assists, 2.5 steals, and a block. I think he will start for this team almost undoubtedly. I think he plays 30 minutes a night, and I think that he has a chance to be a solid top 100 guy, probably even a little bit higher. Those assist numbers are a little bit inflated, as are the steal numbers. But again, very few playmakers on this team outside of Kevin Love. And if he's going to have the ball in his hands a little bit more, I think Osman's a really, really solid standard league option, at least late in drafts. Ante Zizic, 20 and 13. He averaged 3.5 assists. Doesn't block shots, but high efficiency from the field. But we're going to have Tristan Thompson as the backup center here, and Zizic, or Thompson might even start, depending on how they decide to use Kevin Love if they put him at the 4. So Zizic, I think, will play more this coming season. We know that he is one of those guys. Give him 20 minutes and the top 150 numbers should come. We've seen that through his time in the Adriatic League. He showed a little bit of that last season. He showed it again here in Summer League. He looks more comfortable. And if they decide to move on from Tristan Thompson and go with a Love Zizic frontcourt, which would be an absolute disaster defensively, but it could happen. If he gets 25 a night, then he's a bang-on top 100 guy. I still have faith in Zizic. I don't have faith that he's ever going to be a 30-minute per night guy, but he doesn't need to be. High efficiency, high scoring, high rebounding, but does need to add some block shots to the mix. And then you got Colin Sexton there, who averaged almost 20 per game. And I talked about him yesterday. He averaged 20 per game. He took 16 shots, wasn't efficient, 23% from 3, 43 from the field, only 3.5 assists, 0.9 steals, 0.4 threes. He looked fine out there being aggressive again. He pulls mean faces and people love that intensity. And I love his intensity too. Doesn't necessarily mean he's a great defender. He's an aggressive defender. He doesn't mean he's a good one. And the offensive decision-making is questionable. The passing is questionable. The shot selection is questionable. The shooting is questionable. He's not going to be getting the keys to the offense as much as what we saw here in Summer League. And if he can't provide assists, rebounds, steals, or three-pointers, or high efficiency, then where's his fantasy value lying? That's the concern I have with Sexton. I'm very much not as high on him as what other people are, as you would have heard me talk about. I could very well be wrong about Colin Sexton. I don't think he's the best point guard in this class. I think that is perhaps Shea, perhaps Trey Young, perhaps Ali Okobo can jump ahead of those, can jump ahead of Sexton as well. Maybe that's a little bit wild. But Sexton did enough. He played 7 games as well. They didn't ever decide to sit him down and rest him, much like the Lakers with Josh Hart. I wasn't overly impressed with what he did. He pretty much did what I thought he would do coming out of Alabama. Jamal Artis, who played some games for the Magic last season, he played 31 a night and averaged 12 and 6. I don't think he's an NBA caliber player. While Bill Preston, their two-way guy, averaged 11 and 6 in 21 minutes. Got a steal per game. Enough there to make you look at him in a 20-team type league, but I'm not certain we're going to see big type performances from Bill Preston at any time soon. The Dallas Mavericks, Dennis Smith Jr. only played the 2 games and only played 23 minutes, averaged 12, 2, and 6 with 3 steals. I have a pretty good faith in Smith. The field goal percentage is going to be the real concern, so you've got to be looking at punting that category, but I think he should be a pretty solid top 100 guy with top 50 upside, maybe more top 50 next season, but he is going to get a big opportunity this season, and I think playing alongside Luka Doncic will actually help Smith's game. Help him get more in terms of spot-up opportunities instead of pull-up shots, which is something he does struggle with. Get him in better positions, get another guy to handle the ball, and split that duty between those two. And hopefully that enables him to focus a little bit more defensively as well. The golf ball, Ray Spalding, I believe yesterday I said that he wasn't signed by the Mavericks, but I think I'm wrong on that. I think he has been signed by the Mavericks. I thought he was pretty impressive, especially late. 8 and 5 with half a 3 in only 17 minutes. Half a block and a steal. There are minutes in that front court where there's a little bit of a minutes crunch there, of course. They did just trade out Jonathan Motley to the Clippers, but there's still Salah Mejri, there's Dirk Nowitzki, there's Dwight Powell, there's DeAndre Jordan. There's all those guys who are still ahead of Spalding, but he showed me enough to think that maybe at that draft selection, he was he could have been somewhat of a steal. Jalen Jones played decently, 13-6, but he has been moved on by this team. While John Motley had 15.5 and 5.5, and the Clippers front court's a little bit crowded still with the table Montrezl Harrell and the Polish hammer Marcin Gortat ahead of him there. And of course, Toby Harris playing at power forward. But Motley probably has more of an opportunity in LA than he does in Dallas. And definitely a guy, as we saw last season, was able to put up some numbers when given an opportunity. But the Clippers aren't going to be any sort of tanking team, which could limit those chances for John Motley. The burner, Jalen Brunson, I thought struggled. He did average 4.5 assists and 1.2 steals, but 23% shooting from the field is absolutely horrendous. Smith, Doncic, Barea, and it looks like Devin Harris may end up back in Dallas as well. It's going to limit what he can do. I still have some faith in him just with some of his statistical translations, but he didn't look good. Mitch Creek has signed with the Mavericks as well, averaged 7 and 5 with almost a steal in 18 minutes. Just because he's Australian, just because he's white, doesn't mean that he's necessarily going to be the next Joe Ingles. They also signed Ryan Broekhoff, who's a much better bet to be an NBA player than Creek. I think Creek's on a non-guaranteed deal for this team and didn't really do much to get me excited. While Antetokounmpo had 1.3 steals and 1.3 blocks in his 12 minutes. Good old Costas. Let's move on to the Denver Nuggets, who had some interesting performers. Obviously, Michael Porter Jr. wasn't there, but my man Monty Morris was. 18 points, 3 rebounds, 6 assists, half a steal, 1.33, super efficient, doesn't turn the ball over. He's the third string point guard. Full NBA contract for him this season. I'm not sure if Isaiah Thomas is going to be around on this team. I would look for Monty Morris to be a 20-minute per game guy at some point in the next 2 years. And can give you 4.5 to 5 assists in that role. Maybe he hits 1.7 threes and averages 10 points in that time. That's top 200, maybe top 150 type of upside for Monty. I really like him. He's efficient. Coaches love what he can do. And I don't like turnovers as a fantasy category, obviously, but if you are that strong at taking control of the ball and not giving it up, it enables you to get on the court. Tyler Lydon was better than he was last season, where he was not good. Still only 7 points with 2 threes, 6 rebounds, and 1.7 steals, and he's just not going to get much playing time this season, while Malik Beasley had 16 and 4 with 1.7 assists. Maybe he takes on a little bit of an extra role with Wilson Chandler, Kenneth Faried gone, even though he's more of a 2 and a 3, taking on some of those Will Barton bench minutes, but not massive fantasy upside. I did like Vlatko Kanchar, who had 1.8 steals and half a block in his 21 minutes. He won't be coming over this season, while Kenrick Williams disappointed. But I believe Kenrick Williams just signed a two-way deal. Now, just before I started recording, I need to have a look to see exactly where that was, because I vaguely remember that as I woke up reading about Kenrick Williams. The Pelicans have signed him on a two-way deal. He's someone to watch. Didn't have a good summer league, no doubt, but an opportunity there for a team that needs wings and a guy that can defend it and can shoot a little bit. That's a pretty solid spot for him to land in New Orleans. So keep an eye on Kenrick Williams, who did disappoint, but there's still a little bit there to see. We also had Devon Akun-Purcell, who averaged 12 points in 19 minutes in his 4 games for the Nuggets. Still probably a little bit old to get too excited about. While Peter Cornelia, a guy who I thought could be an interesting NBA player, he has struggled in the last 2 summer leagues, unfortunately for him. Let's move on to the Detroit Pistons. A couple of strong performances here. Henry Allenson, I wouldn't necessarily say it was a strong performance, but he took a lot of shots. 16 field goal attempts per game, 16 points and 7 rebounds. Importantly, or interestingly, he averaged 3.5 assists. He's not going to protect the rim. He shot 29.9% from the field and 16.7% from 3. I think there's an opportunity for Hank this season in Detroit with Tony Tolliver moving on. That backup stretch 4 position is available. Now, how Dwayne Casey looks to use that, it remains to be seen. He obviously went in with instructions in this summer league: take every shot you possibly can, have that opportunity. There is still the little dog Glenn Robinson. There's the tackle box John Lua, who can all fill that role as well. So by no means is he guaranteed a role this season, but I think he's going to have the opportunity at least to earn it for this coming season. And definitely took the shots, just didn't hit them at all. We also had the Shark, Bruce Brown, who didn't shoot very well either, 28.8% from the field, but 7 boards, 3 assists, 1.7 steals. I think he can be a rotation guy. I think he's got a chance to jump ahead of Langston Galloway this season. You've got Reggie Jackson, Ish Smith, Luke Kennard, Reggie Bullock, Jameer Nelson, Stan Johnson. So quite a few guys ahead of him. I think probably next season's the one we look to Brucey Brown, but there's some nice performances from him. The defensive stuff, he looked more comfortable offensively as well. And then we had Kyrie Thomas, who didn't really impress, but has some solid fantasy potential. 9.5 points with 2 rebounds and 1.5 steals. Eric Griffin, a guy who dominated the G League last season. Yeah, it's high efficiency stuff. Steals and blocks, not too bad for Griffin in 15 minutes. Over half a steal and half a block in that time is all right. Just don't think he's ever going to turn into an NBA caliber player, unfortunately for him. And then let's move on to the last team that I'm going to cover in today's show, and that is the Golden State Warriors. We know that Jordan Bell was excellent, averaging only 5 points, but 7 boards, 4 assists, 2.5 steals, and almost 2.5 blocks. With DeMarcus Cousins out for the start of the season, Bell and Kevon Looney will be battling for that starting center spot. Zaza's gone, David West is gone. Damian Jones is also in that mix, who had an okay summer league, averaging 10 and 6 with 1.3 blocks. But I think Bell is worthy of a late fantasy pick. If he gets 25 minutes per night, he's going to be a top 120 guy for that period where Cousins is out. When Boog comes back, does he move into the primary backup power forward spot behind Draymond Green? I think they'll be looking to give 20 minutes per night to Bell this season, and that will be elevated earlier in the season. I liked Kendrick Nunn and Marcus Derrickson. They both should be in the mix for two-way deals. Nunn had 12 and 5.5 with 1.7 steals, while Derrickson had 13 and 5 and hit 2 threes as a stretchy type power forward. Both those guys did enough to make me think that they deserve at least a two-way spot somewhere. While Jacob Evans struggled, only 6 points, shot 32% from the field, 0.6 steals, did battle an injury at one point, but he just didn't look good. And if they bring Pat McCaw back, it seems unlikely that Evans will be a rotation guy this season. A couple of other guys, John Clavel, some NBA experience, Josh Majette as well, JP Tokoto, some names you might remember, but overall very little to get excited about with any of those guys. That does it for these 10 teams from Summer League. Just recapping some of the performances that we saw through Vegas, Sacramento, and Utah. Don't forget Patreon. You get priority access to this new Dynasty/Keeper League that I am starting up. And check my Twitter timeline for information on the redraft leagues, which will start drafting in September. Just recruiting those last final spots at the moment. Going to start the Basketball Monster projections today as well, so getting ready for that. And for those of you who continue to ask, we generally target to open Basketball Monster on the 1st of September. So at this point, nothing is going to be different for that for this season. Go and subscribe to this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, TuneIn, Stitcher, Spotify, and leave a 5-star rating. It is the best way to show that you support the show. Also on YouTube, subscribe, thumbs up, leave a comment, and go and do all of that stuff, guys. We are done here. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya. Jeremy Grant.